Great. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, Your Worship, members of council. Thank you for having me here this morning. I just want to first introduce some of the people that are here with me today. We have Lillian Kwok of Nations Grocery Store. We have Shelley Faulkner from the Art Gallery of Hamilton, Sue Bennison of Meridian, Peter Tosh of Rancor, Krista Boyer of Ambitious Realty, Joe Mercanti of the Hamilton Convention Center, and Megan Platts of the RHB. We are representing many representatives from the development community and the attractions and businesses located around the intersection of Bay Street. Great cities have great transit, and we have HSR. And that's not to demean the many hundreds of women and men that work hard each and every day to deliver the services in our community with the best resources that they have. But transit, which besides educational institutions is the most important underpinning of a vibrant metropolitan economy, has been neglected in this city for far too long. In one fell swoop, we have the extraordinary opportunity to modernize a key backbone of our transportation system and catalyze a 25 transit delivered to all the corners of this great city as the population the size of Kitchener migrates to Hamilton. And like cities the world over that have built LRT, when construction is complete, everybody will say they were for the project all along. Council has voted to support the transformative nature of this $1 billion investment, voting time and time again to ask the province to pay for our vision. And upon the announcement of secured funding from the province for 100% of the cost of the build, Council authorized the city to enter into an MOU with Metrolinx, promising to exercise good faith in the expediting of the building. That we have. Upwards of $70 million has been spent on the considerable preliminary work that is necessary with such a once-in-a-lifetime city-building project. The good people that have toiled in this work for far too long have kept us on track and on budget, and I want to praise Paul Johnson and Andrew Hope and their teams. And as the Chamber, we are excited to get on with helping the businesses along the route get the support services they need to endure the construction. Special to this project from the thousands of citizens, businesses, and anchor institutions that have demonstrated overwhelming support for this project. All of these people and entities are saying that LRT is important to their well-being, the well-being of their institutions, and are in the process promising to do whatever we can collectively do to help with the heavy lifting required to endure what will be a major disruption to the city. So you, at one point anyway, the business community, citizens, and the anchor institutions all support LRT, and we are actively building it. Thus, whether LRT should be built or not is not the question for today. That was already settled a long time ago. Today should be just a routine approval of an amended EA that was approved by you in 2011. There are no major changes. There are no surprises. What I want to spend the balance LRT can be improved. During this process, a number of key stakeholders have taken the opportunity, invited by the public information consultation process, to recommend measures that would optimize the investment. The Chamber represents a number of key stakeholders that have taken the opportunity to specifically address adding a Bay Street stop at the intersection of Bay and King. We have determined the original project design had one glaring omission. In the middle of our downtown, we have 850 meters between two stops planned at Queen Street and at Gore Park. We have such a significant number of commercial and community destinations located in the vicinity of Bay and King that an additional stop at Bay Street would immediately become, in our estimation, one of the busiest stops along the line. The stop would be even busier when it helps unlock the potential of the 270 degrees of surface parking lots that make Bay and King the most underperforming intersection in the entire city. The LRT Task Force of the Chamber recommended writing a letter through the PIC process to the LRT project team laying out the business case for the Bay Street stop. That submission was presented to the LRT subcommittee created by Council. The LRT subcommittee asked staff to conduct an impact analysis. Staff found that the overall impact of adding the stop was minimal. Councillor Farr provided a rudimentary analysis of the increased tax revenue that could be generated by adding the stop, giving us good confidence that the $2.6 million investment in the physical stop will more than pay for itself almost immediately. The LRT subcommittee then unanimously endorsed beginning discussions with Metrolinx to determine if the stop can be added within the funding envelope that has already been secured. But what should have been a matter of routine approval, as one of your colleagues acknowledged to the media, got caught up in the political game that LRT has become, thus requiring us to make this appearance. We thank Councillors Pearson and Jackson for having the courage to give us this very clear business case another hearing. We now ask that you endorse the course of action that even LRT's greatest skeptics have conceded. If you're going to build Beeline LRT, of course it should have a Bay Street stop. This is not a matter of scope creep. The PIC process is closed. There will not be further stops added to the project. We are not seeking to increase the project costs. We are asking Metrolinx, if Burn has attested, the stop is important to them to accommodate the over 70,000 visits they get annually. And these stakeholders behind me and those that have signed the letter can attest this is important to serving the major destinations arrayed in the Bay King vicinity and unlocking a great deal of transit-oriented development. The economic development potential, the proximity to numerous attractions, and the accessibility to key services should make adding the stop the easiest decision you'll make on LRT. If you are committed to seeing this $1 billion investment optimized, we're sure that you will agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Councillor Farr and then Councillor Aidan Johnson. Councillor Farr.
Thank you, Chair. You're doing great. It's an important day, and we have some very important folks up here from the world of business, and particularly who are standing behind you. So I thank you for your time today. It looks like for you, anyway, you can get back at it in your very busy schedules in a few minutes, but I do have some questions, and Keanin will represent all of you with, I'm sure, some thorough responses through you, Chair. I'm glad you said, quote unquote, mine was rudimentary analysis, but I'll open with the fact that, and what Keanin was referring to as it relates to the Bay King stop, was some calls to planners on city staff, and Larry Friday, who is retiring, I think, this week in our finance department, taxation department. I asked two questions. What are we currently receiving from the tax base at the general vicinity of King and Bay? And the answer was annualized about $111,000. And to the planners more specifically, I asked the question, going into this unanimous decision of the LRT subcommittee to add the stop at Bay and King, what would approximately, not ask about commercial or anything else, bring that number to? And it was give or take $5 million. Could be above, depending on the cost of the unit.
Refer to Shelley Faulkner, actually, from the AGH to answer that question.
Thank you, Keanin. Hello, good morning. Or maybe it's early afternoon. I think it's still morning. Councillor Farr, I'd love to answer that question by providing some facts, because I'm sure everyone has opinions about the stops and where they should be. I've now been living here in Hamilton for almost 2.5 years. I'm the president and CEO of the Art Gallery of Hamilton, and I've had the pleasure of spending many long days and evenings at the corner of King and Bay. And I'm going to start with the art gallery itself. We just had a stellar year last year at 255,000 visitors. The economic impact of that number was conducted by the Ministry of Culture back in 2014 when our numbers were even less, and it's over $20 million to the City of Hamilton. That's just the Art Gallery of Hamilton. Now, when I expand beyond that, we have a serious cultural hub at King and Bay, and I don't know if all of you have noticed, but the floods of people that pour in from all over for the concerts and the music. You've got the Philharmonic. Now, it does about 15,000 a year, and their number is 1.5 million to the City of Hamilton. Then there are the large enormous flood of people for the music industry in this city is absolutely shocking. It's amazing. The CBC were here last week, spent a whole day just doing a focus on Hamilton. And a big part of that was culture. So there's something very big happening in this city, and I think you have to make sure you have the infrastructure to support it. And King and Bay is flooded with people when a concert happens. When we have a show like Danby or Beaver Hall, it's packed. You just have to come down here in the evenings or come on the weekends. There's a lot of folks here. And then there's another fact you have to think about. It's the demographic change that's happening out there. We have millennials now pouring into Hamilton. Okay, they're taking second degrees and third degrees. They're very conscious about the environment, and they don't like to drive. The other thing is our aging population. Hamilton has more seniors here than the average in Canada, and we all know, because of the baby boomers, that we're living in a graying society. So I just want to point out a couple of facts. It's extraordinarily important that that stop happen at Bay and King if you're going to continue to support what is quickly becoming one of Canada's biggest and hottest cultural hubs. Thank you.
Are you done, Councillor Farr?
Sure, we could also recognize the current and I know future Hamilton Bulldog playoff runs, where this particular LRT would be a benefit to people getting to games and other events. Anyway, I mentioned the ifpress.com, Madam Chair. Now to the Waterloo. Reported unprecedented residential growth in and around the stops, and of course we have 270 degrees. We have about 180 to 270 degrees of great development potential with surface asphalt in and around Bay Street. Waterloo region and the Waterloo Record, Keanin, through you, Chair, they recently completed their LRT. What can we learn from a recent Waterloo Record report with respect to some of the statistics there?
Thank you. I will, Madam Deputy Mayor, through you, I will refer. Actually, it's the London Free Press that actually did the media piece, and it was about because they're having this discussion as well in their community, and so they were looking at, however, the Waterloo region and some of the outcomes and some of the lessons learned from the building of that project, because Waterloo is pretty much done. Trains are almost running along that corridor. And what we have also learned from the Downtown Waterloo BIA was that, in fact, very few businesses had to actually close. Obviously, there was impact. It was almost uniform. But what they also did was undertook a significant number of interventions to help make sure that they were mitigating the impact to the of the many hundreds that border that project. I think we heard today that there are at least 5 businesses that are still kind of upset with what the impacts have been to them. But I think that that's a really, really good ratio. And I think that one of the very first things we're going to be doing is, we've talked to Metrolinx and the city LRT project team about doing a series of seminars for the businesses along the route in King Street here. And within that proposal is a proposal to do a road trip up to Kitchener-Waterloo, perhaps Eglinton as well, and to do a series of seminars for the businesses along the route. And a lot of what we will be teaching those businesses or sharing with those businesses will be the lessons learned from communities like KW, Eglinton, Minneapolis is another one. There are so many other communities throughout North America from which we can learn, and which gives us the basis for really having great confidence that this will be a successful project here in this community.
Thanks, Keanin. And I referenced the wrong media. There's been a lot of positive media in and around the Tri-Cities, London as well, with BRT. And you mentioned the 2 businesses that unfortunately closed in the Waterloo BIA from the media source that you accurately quoted. That's of approximately 450 businesses in the Waterloo BIA, which, by the way, endorsed through you, Chair, the anchor institutions, Keanin, and the letter they wrote in support of this project. It was a significant statement. Can you talk about how all of that came about? And it'd be smart to put the timelines in, because you certainly met the timelines on engagement. Being a task force member, I know that.
Yeah, so the Anchor Institutions is an initiative that started about 3 or 4 years ago. It's in a vibrant community and one in which all the institutions are working together. We should be meeting at least on a quarterly basis to talk about our plans and how they overlap and how we can help each other. And it's particularly important in the discussion around community hubs. We're talking about making social services investments in places of need and trying to figure out what sort of blend of services that community needs. And of course, it would require, our education institutions, our health sciences institutions, and our school boards to collect of those types of hubs. Over the course of our coming together now over the last 3 or 4 years, an interest in LRT in Hamilton, whether it be to provide transportation for our tens of thousands of employees that work in those anchor institutions, or the tens of thousands of people in the community that those institutions serve, and linking together all the various assets that those institutions have across the city. And so over time we determined that it was really important to make a statement like this. And I don't think that it can be overstated enough how important and how consequential this statement is by the anchor institutions. I can't imagine another time in Hamilton's history in which we've had all the major institutions collaborate and send a letter like this. So when you look at the quality of the leadership that exists, the number of people they serve, difficult for anybody to ignore their estimation that this is really important to them and really important to the future of this community.
Okay, I really appreciate it, Keanin. And again, I've enjoyed several years now. We're 2 years into implementation of LRT, although some of the themes today you'd think we just decided getting $1 billion. But regardless of that, you've allowed a little latitude, Chair. My next question, I'll let you decide whether or not our speaker can answer it, given that we have so many speakers to come, but it's the cost of doing nothing, which we answered many, many years ago. The cost of not doing LRT is really important in a business case, and we have before us the leader of the Chamber of Commerce. So if it's not appropriate, that's fine. I'm sure we'll bring it up later, but through you, Chair, to Keanin, if that's okay.
Okay. So I am going to say that the Chamber of Commerce is on here as a delegate to speak about the Bay Street stop. So let's just leave it there, please. Okay. I'm sure that it will.
No problem with it. It's consistent with what's.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. Councillor Aidan Johnson.
Simply leave it at a big thank you to Ms. Falconer himself, who is a heavy lifter on our LRT implementation committee, the economic case in making it tirelessly. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Matt Green.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor, and this is specific to the Bay Street stop, and it actually is related to some of the points that were referenced in the presentation. In Kitchener, there's a $10 million asking price is the latest sign of commercial real estate boom. And the regional chair out there, through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, says that these effects are being seen along the LRT corridor. Much more hasn't gone public that they are aware of, and there's things that are coming online due to this economic uplift that they're seeing. So a lot of conversation's been had, Madam Deputy Mayor, around the real estate boom that's happening here in Hamilton and of course throughout Southern Ontario as it relates to these projects. But I don't think enough has been said about the commercial boom. So would you care to comment on the Bay Street opportunity? And I know it was touched on in a preliminary way, but very specifically, given that one of the key factors of doing this is economic uplift. In your opinion, what do you see as being the potential economic uplift of including a Bay Street stop as it relates to commercial properties and our surface parking lots in that area?
Well, so obviously we have a lot of commercial interests here, lines behind me that are supportive of this. I think implicitly they're saying if the Bay Street stop goes ahead, they will do more as at a higher level. I think the other interesting thing, so despite the amenities, despite how important the intersection is for us, it is also one of the most underperforming intersections in probably the entire city. And we have obviously we have some street wall along the King West BIA, which is also a supporter of the Bay Street stop. But we also had the Sir John Macdonald site that I think is really important to this discussion as well. And I think that whatever developments you see happen along that corridor, of course it's going to be mixed use. Of course commercial will go on the bottom floor, if not the second floor as well. And then we have the opportunity to build much higher on top of that. So I think that all the street front that's going to be developed along that corridor will be commercial for sure. It depends on what the developers think in terms of the mix of the top floor or two.
Okay, that suffices. Thank you very much.
Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Keanin. And you know I do support the Bay Street stop, so don't necessarily as optimistic. Have you read the Federal Treasury Reserve report by Jennifer Schewitz in respect to higher order transit and commercial uplift?
I have not.
I suggest you read it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Keanin, for coming in and your presentation. A couple of questions, Keanin. You're obviously very, very passionate, one of the strongest supporters of the LRT. So with or without the Bay King stop, you're still a strong supporter of the LRT, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. If the $2.6 million for the Bay King by our staff is not included in the $2.6 million, if that's not within the $1 billion envelope, if we hypothetically hear that, any comment back then? What should we do, Keanin, or should we look at a trade-off maybe with the Mary Street, the Queen Street, or should we proceed?
No, through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, I don't think that a realignment along the rest of the corridor is required in this case. I think that obviously I want the project to go ahead with or without the Bay Street stop. I think what we're trying to do at this point in time is trying to prevent council and the LRT project team from making the biggest, most glaring mistake when the project is done.
So I appreciate that, and obviously the hope for those that are strongly promoting Bay King is that it will be covered within the $1 billion envelope, and I'm just anticipating if it's not, then we have obviously a decision to make down the road. Do we really need Mary Street? Is Bay King more important? Can we do without Queen Street? We've added Gage Street, so I'm just trying to understand as we're adding more stops, Madam Deputy Mayor, through to Keanin, so I just hope you appreciate that concern.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, I do appreciate that. My understanding is the request at this point in time is to talk to Metrolinx about whether it can be added within the current envelope. So I'm certainly in accordance with that. I think one of the big things to point to, however, looking at getting into the weeds on transit-oriented development and the work that McMaster Institute of Transportation and Logistics has done, urban center stations are the ones that provide us with the greatest opportunity for uplift. And we only have one, as the MITL has done. That's at James and King, but Bay and King would be the second urban core. When you look at and you analyze the topographies of the intersections and in terms of the mix of residential and commercial and the opportunity for intensification.
Thanks, Keanin. I will be asking our own staff later on when they present exactly why they didn't look at the McNabb terminal, which to me would seem like an obvious one, given it hooks right in to our primary HSR bus terminal downtown. So, Madam Deputy Mayor, I didn't want you to chime in, but unless you want to comment on that possibility too, Keanin.
Well, if I may, Madam Deputy Mayor, and obviously I didn't design it and I'm not an engineer, but the going eastbound on the Beeline LRT, there is a stop that would be before James Street, so it would eventually.
For your great advocacy and the whole team, and you know all of the here and you know. Good question in terms of having staff have a look at that. What's being asked for is let's have Metrolinx staff look at this. Let's not dismiss this. Let's have that assessment done so that we can understand what the impacts are. Obviously, I think there is a view, and I think Paul Johnson said earlier that you know the $2.6 million is really inconsequential relative to the overall project cost. So I would that it could be included. But you're asking today. Look at this and come back to us and tell us what the impacts are and how we can accomplish this or not accomplish this if that turns out to be the case. That's essentially what you're asking for.
That was exactly the recommendation that was made by the LRT committee.
Correct. Right. So I think that's a reasonable recommendation to ask for. And you know what? We should be making these decisions with all of the information. Let's look at the evidence. Let's have Metrolinx look at the evidence and then come back to us with an informed piece of work that will help inform our decision-making process. So I thank you for that direction. I'm hopeful that Council will adhere to that and get us to have that second look at what the opportunity at Bay Street are, and I think you've outlined it very well. Couldn't said it any better, Keanin, than what you've said it already, so thank you.
For your presentation. The next presenter is Ryan McGreal, Hamilton Light Rail, respecting the LRT environment.